much.
So,
And if everybody who's not speaking could mute their microphones, unless you've got a question.
Okay.
How do you do that?
Michelle and I had similar paths to public office. We both started with leadership roles in the synagogue and the same synagogue, Temple Beth Sholem. And then we ran for public office. In my case, I got involved because Maria Greenwald was running for state assembly in 1988. And they were looking to round out the ticket to support her. They were looking for somebody Jewish from the Woodcrest area. So they asked my brother-in-law, and he said no, but my brother-in-law would be a good candidate, but I don't think he would do it. And then they asked my neighbor across the street, who was well known in Cherry Hill circles as a prominent lawyer, and he said no. But he said, my neighbor across the street would be a good candidate, but I don't think he would do it. So they decided they better talk to this guy who knows both of them. And that's how I got drawn into being a candidate. Michelle knows Susan Bass-Levin, and she knows me. And both of us promoted her candidacy for council. So it all comes from different paths. I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to Central High School, and then I went to the University of Pennsylvania and studied electrical engineering. I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois, and then I went to work at RCA, where I stayed my entire career, 42 years. RCA and all its descendants, GE, Martin Marietta, Lockheed Martin, and finally it was L3 Communications. I joined the synagogue in the late 70s and quickly became involved on committees, the board of directors, the executive committee, fundraising, interviewing clergy candidates. The big issue when I joined the synagogue, shortly after I joined the synagogue, was the changing demographics in South Jersey. Jews were moving further and further east. And having a synagogue in Haddon Heights put us really at a major disadvantage. And the synagogue investigated the possibility of moving one time, and there was a congregational vote and it failed. When I got involved on the executive committee, I sort of stoked the fires of reinvestigating it with a little bit more of a sophisticated approach. And so we hired an architect, we hired a fundraiser to do feasibility studies, and we ended up moving the synagogue from Haddon Heights to Cherry Hill. And when we were in Haddon Heights, we had about 450 families. And then when we moved to Cherry Hill, we had over 800 families. I became involved in politics, as I said, in 1987, and we moved to synagogue in January of 1989. So there was a bit of an overlap there. And then I turned my attention full time to politics. In 1987, they changed the form of government in Cherry Hill to a strong mayor government rather than one led by a business administrator. And they also moved the election for efficiency and to save money from March to coincide with the November elections. So when they did that, they wiped out all the council seats, and we had 7 candidates all running for seats. At that time, Maria Greenwald was running for assembly in the 6th district against Lee Laskin, and Susan Bass-Levin was running for mayor locally along with me. I had known Susan because she was a neighbor of mine, but not really closely. But I got, of course, to know her very, very well during the campaign. It was a long campaign. We started in March and the election wasn't until November. So we spent a lot of time learning about the local government and the workings of it, which was very, very helpful. I was elected with John Adler and Steve Barbell. We were the three Jewish candidates on council. I also was elected with Howard Haas and John Amato, both of whom had been councilmen for quite a while, and both of whom acted as my mentors over the years. I learned a lot from them. The climate back then was very interesting. There was a rift between the local Democrats and the county Democrats, even during that election campaign, which extended into the early years of our administration. In fact, in 1989, we elected 7 council people at once and a mayor in 87. And then we drew lots to see who would run for re-election in 1989. So 4 of us had 2-year terms and ran for re-election in 89. And then the mayor and 3 other council people ran in 4 years. And thereafter, it alternated every 4 years for each set of people. So in 1989, when I was running for re-election, the county Democrats actually put up a slate in the primary against the local Democrats. And in the end, we shocked everybody in the political world in the state of New Jersey by winning 3 of the 4 seats. We lost the 4th seat very narrowly. And in the end, that's how Jeff Nash joined the council. And we had a very, very warm and amicable relationship with Jeff, which I think paved the way over the years to the local Democratic Party and the county Democrats burying the hatchet. The 2 major issues at the beginning of my term were low-cost housing, the Mount Laurel rulings, and I can say categorically that Cherry Hill was really pushed up against the wall when it came to that, much more percentage-wise, in my opinion, than surrounding communities. But we managed to find a solution which I think was the least disruptive to life in Cherry Hill. Rather than place all the low-cost housing in one area, we spread it around various developments, requiring them, when they're building apartments, and to include a certain percentage of it to be low-cost housing. And in point of fact, you can't really tell which ones are low-cost housing and which ones aren't, which I think was really a benefit to the township. The second issue that we faced shortly thereafter was reevaluation of taxes. There's a law in the books that says you have to reevaluate every so often. And Cherry Hill hadn't done it in far too long. And we were being pressured by the courts to do a reevaluation. Now, you might want to know why is it that a township doesn't want to do a reevaluation? Well, first of all, when you do a reevaluation, you don't collect any more money. You just redistribute who's paying the money. And so what happens is about 1/3 of the people end up paying more in taxes, and they're very vociferous and very unhappy. And about 1/3 of the people end up paying less in taxes, and they don't say a word. They're happy, they keep their mouth shut, and they go about their business. And about 1/3 of the people stays the same, and they don't say anything. So in the end, political entities generally avoid as much as they can doing reevaluations. After that, things went a little bit more smoothly. Our council meetings were at the time very, very tame. They were characterized by the following things. First of all, we had very little newspaper coverage. Every once in a while, a reporter for the Courier Post might show up at a council meeting if they caught wind of an interesting subject, but not that often. Almost nobody from the public came. There were a few crazy people who showed up in the beginning. There was one guy, they told me he thought he was Abraham Lincoln. I said, you mean he dresses like Abraham Lincoln? They said, no, he thinks he's Abraham Lincoln. And there were a few other crazy people who showed up from time to time, but our council meetings were so smooth running and non-contentious that I think they found other places to go to cause problems. They stopped coming to our council meetings. The Republican, by the way, I was elected with all seven of us were Democrats. In fact, as an aside, in the 14 years I was on council, there was only one Republican elected. It was a young man who lived on the west side of Cherry Hill, whose grandfather had been a state senator. And a lot of people voted for him because they thought they were voting for his grandfather. He was a very nice young man. He was a lawyer. And after he'd served about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months on, maybe a little bit more, maybe a year or so on council, he pulled a gun on his girlfriend. And he ended up making a plea bargain to save his position as a lawyer, so he wasn't disbarred. He resigned from council, and there was never another Republican ever elected again during the time that I was there. So the Republican Party was pretty much in disarray. So the council meetings were pretty smooth. We had an extremely strong staff that Mayor Levin had put together, and we were supported intimately by the treasurer, development, business area. And so if we had issues, we could go in and we could talk to these people, and they would counsel us, and we would make the decisions, and we would hash out any particular problems between council meetings. And then by the time we got to the council meetings, there really wasn't a whole lot of contention or things to discuss. And sometimes our meetings got to be a little short because of that problem. And we were criticized for that too. We were criticized for having contentious meetings, and then we were criticized for having short meetings that weren't contentious. That's the nature of the business. In the beginning, we rotated who was going to be council president. We started with the senior members, John Amato and Howard Haas, and then Steve Barbell. And during this period of time, I had really gotten very, very close to Susan Bass Levin. I think in part because her father was an engineer, she and I tended to think through issues the same way. And it got us into trouble a couple of times because we agreed so often, we really sometimes only saw one side of an issue. And we quickly learned that we had to bring other people in to our discussions to reach a consensus that would be reflective of the township as a whole and of the opinions of everybody as a whole. But over the years, we got to be closer and closer friends. And after I served as council president, it was her desire that I stay. And when Susan had a desire, generally that desire gets fulfilled. So I was a council president for about the last 8 years of my term as a council person. For the first 10 years on council, I served on the planning board, where I got involved with all the issues in the township in terms of development. And frankly, I learned pretty quickly that if you want to know what's going on in the township, you're much better off going to planning board meetings than you are going to council meetings. You really hear, you get a lot of citizens showing up, you hear people's problems, and you see problems being solved. And it was really a great experience. And it was at the planning board that I got involved with the building of the JCC, and ended up in court on that to testify, which was interesting because I had to recuse myself from any voting because I had already contributed to the JCC campaign. But I still ended up in court on that. Another issue of interest, maybe to this group during that period of time, was there was a mentally ill person in town. Or I don't know if he was from Cherry Hill, but he was in the area. And because the mayor was Jewish, her counselor, her chief attorney was Jewish, the business administrator was Jewish. This guy was an anti-Semite. He even had business cards printed up advertising that fact. And he used to terrorize the people inside the township. And they were really very, very nervous whenever he was in the building. One time he showed up at a council meeting that I was running, and he had a shopping bag next to him on the floor. I immediately called the chief of police and told him to send some officers up to the council chambers. And they literally had a policeman standing right next to him because he was sitting on the aisle for the duration of the meeting. He ended up being institutionalized. And then, in an ironic twist of fate to close the circle, he ended up haunting the building of Temple Beth Sholem. He used to show up at the building site and give everybody a hard time for a while. I don't know what happened to him, but he disappeared. So over the time I was in office, a lot of things interested me from a Jewish point of view. There were a lot of events to go to, a lot of blue ribbons to cut, a lot of businesses opening that you wanted to support. But it was impossible to do everything, although I tried to do everything at the beginning, but I was mentored by the veterans that said, look, pick the ones that are of most interest to you and go to those. So I ended up going to openings like the Polish Day School. And I always attended Yom HaShoah events representing council. I spoke to as many Jewish groups as possible, which is one of the reasons why I was more than happy to do it today when Dave invited me. And towards the end of my term, when I gave up being on the planning board, I joined the library board. And so the reason I did that is because around that time, Susan Bass-Levin was very, very much interested in building a new library for the township. Now, our library on Kings Highway, the one that had been there for many, many years, was built by a very famous architect who was just big an article about him in the paper. And it was a very, very interesting building because it was half underground. And as fascinating as the building was, it was about the worst possible design for a library. I quickly learned that the most efficient design for a library is a shoebox, just a rectangle. So in the late 90s, we started investigating library designs and building a new library. I ended up becoming chairman of the library board to help push that along. And then in 2001, Susan Bass-Levin was asked to become a member of the governor's cabinet. And after much soul searching and a couple of other interesting twists to the story, I agreed to be mayor for the year 2002 to finish out her term. Now, I never discussed this with her, but I am pretty certain that one of the reasons why she wanted me to be mayor that year was the fact that I could continue two of her pet projects and help push them along in that year before I gave up the mayorship. One was the building of the new library. And I'm proud to say that we did get that done. And it was done in a manner in which we were all proud. And as an aside, you can never really escape from Susan. About 6 years ago, she asked me if I would join the library board. They were really hurting and they needed some experience. And then, as my bad luck would have it, a year after I joined, the president left the library board, and I got my arm twisted again, and I've been president of the library board for the last 5 years. And I said I would do it for 1 year and 1 year only. I told that to Susan right up front. Well, here I am 6 years later, still the president. The other major project that Susan was very much interested in was building the big shopping center where Wegmans is. And Susan had really very, very grandiose plans, award-winning plans. The architecture for that shopping center won international awards for mixed use. It was really a dream development, but it was a very, very difficult project to build. It was very, very difficult to finance. And in the end, there were many, many changes made to that project after I left office. The last thing I want to mention is while I was president, probably the most interesting, and while I was mayor, probably most interesting that happened to me was that I was accused of poisoning a neighborhood full of children. You might want to ask me a question about that later, but I'll just throw that out there. I got to be on television, on the radio. That was kind of cool. So with that, I'd like to introduce Michele Golkow again and ask her to give some impressions that she has about what's happening on council and in the township these days. Michele?
Thanks, Art, and good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you on Zoom. I'm sorry I didn't have the chance to meet you in person. I was looking forward to actually coming to the JCC and getting out of my house a bit, but I'm glad we're at least able to get together on Zoom, and I hope to see you in person one day soon. So thank you for inviting me, and let me give you just a little bit of background about myself and sort of then maybe you'll understand how I got to be on a town council in Cherry Hill. It might make a little more sense. I moved here to Cherry Hill in 1994 with my husband, Kurt, who had grown up here in Cherry Hill. And we didn't know too many people here, wanted to try to meet some people and get involved. I had a young daughter. My daughter, Shayna, was 18 months old. She's now a rabbi out in LA. So time really does fly. So I got involved in Federation first. It's true what Ed said that what Art said that we had parallel paths, but before I got to TBS, I really started Federation in their sort of young members group called Merkaz. And we used to meet at the old JCC building down on Route 70. I don't know if your group met there back in the day, but it was quite different from the new beautiful building that we have. And thank you, Art, for working on that project way back when, so we could have our new beautiful building today. But that was my first dunking my toes in the water in the Jewish community was through Federation. And then I got to know the people in Federation and in all the sister agencies as well, particularly Jewish Family and Children's Services. My parents moved up here from Florida in about the year 2000, and my mother was very ill, which is why they moved here. And I needed help. I needed guidance for support and services. So I turned to JFCS, and they were like my lifeline in terms of helping us to care for my mother at first at home and then in a nursing home. So I immediately had an affinity for JFCS and started volunteering there and trying to give back because of what a help they were to me and my family. So I got involved there. I joined the board. I served in various roles. And then eventually I became president at JFCS in 2006 through 2008. And I'm still involved there to this day on the advisory council. I'm a lifer there. I'm also still involved in Federation. I'm on the Federation board. So my connection to JFCS and Federation has really endured through the years. And I've gotten to know a lot of people and understood the issues of our Jewish community through my work there. Sort of at the same time as I was getting involved in JFCS, our family joined Temple Beth Shalom. My husband grew up at TBS, so it was a natural fit. We started sending my daughter to preschool there. And I kind of looked around at TBS and thought, how come there's no young members group here at TBS? By this time I had another young child. My son David was born, and I was busy. I was, an attorney working in Philadelphia. I had 2 small children, my parents to take care of, and wondering how come there's no way for me to be involved at synagogue with my young family instead of doing like sisterhood or being on a committee with just adults. So I got involved to start a young members group at TBS. And that's sort of how it all began for me at the synagogue. Joel Horowitz was the president then. And, once you do one thing, I'm sure everyone here knows, once you volunteer to do one thing, always leads to something else, and you're asked to do the next thing. And if you're not good about saying no, well, then you end up on the board and the executive committee. I served as vice president. Art, you'll remember I was one of your vice presidents way back when, and Art and others like Susan Baskey's really were role models for me and inspired me to take on leadership roles. I eventually became the president of TBS in 2015 and served there and in various capacities. And I'm currently the chair of the TBS Governance Committee and serve on the board there. So I wanted to give you this background so you could see that sort of, I really spent years involved in the Jewish community and listening to people and solving problems and advocating for issues that affected us. So I guess it was just sort of natural for Art and Susan Bass-Levin to think of me to run for council so that I could have the opportunity to serve not just the Jewish community, but the broader community as well. So like Art said, I was actually appointed to an open seat on council in April of 2019. And then I ran in the campaign and the following election in November and won a seat of my own beginning in January of 2020, currently serving. So I'm about halfway through my 4-year term at this point. And because of my background, I feel a special responsibility to represent our Jewish community and understand the issues impacting our Jewish community, and making sure that they're brought to the township level as well. So that's sort of the background. That's sort of how I got to town council where I am today. And Art asked me to sort of talk a little bit about how council might be different now versus back then, some of the things that he spoke about to contrast a little bit. So I'll do that. The first is that I think the focus, the real focus for us here in Cherry Hill is on the primary campaign. Of course, we care about the general election in November, but I think everyone here knows that the demographics in Cherry Hill is heavily weighted towards Democrats right now and not Republicans, an overwhelming majority. So the real race is often not against the Republicans in the general, but the primary. And I think that was the case mostly for Art also. He mentioned the sort of group of county Democrats that ran against them at the time. We don't have that. It sounds like that was all smoothed over and works out really nicely. We all worked together really well. But when I ran in 2019, there was a different group of Democrats, they called themselves Democrats, that ran against us. And it was a heavily contested primary. And we worked really hard to show who we were and what we stood for and the issues that were important to us. And we won the primary election at that time. This past election, I didn't run, as Art mentioned, we sort of alternate. So it's, when I ran, it was 3 council people with the mayor, who's Susan Shenangulo. And then the alternate years, the other 2 years, the next 2 years, it's the other 4 council people who run. So the other 4 council members ran this past year, and there was no contested primary. So we'll see what happens going forward in 2023. That will be the next election where the council, again, I will run together with the mayor. So the focus is on more on the primary these days. Social media now, of course, plays a huge role in everything we do, including the campaign, which I'm guessing wasn't the case when Art was running. It really, now so much goes on platforms like, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So during the campaign, any stop we made to visit people and attend events, right afterwards, we would post on Facebook a message and a photo to show the broader community what we were doing in the campaign. We also had to always monitor social media because, you know, now with social media, people have an instant platform to get out their message, whether it's factual or not. You know, sometimes people misunderstand the facts, but sometimes people misrepresent the facts. And either way, now a part of the campaign and also part of governing is looking to see what people are posting on social media, and when it's not true, coming up with a strategy to get the facts out so people understand what's true and what's not. You know, the campaign, we also did a lot of the traditional things that Art probably did with, you know, going door to door and lawn signs and some ads in the newspaper, and also, you know, mailings, direct mailings. But a lot of what we did was social media, posting on social media to get the word out. The other big difference, I would say, is probably the prevalence of vote by mail. Or when you ran, there probably was no vote by mail whatsoever. It was all focused on election day. Well, that's very different now because vote by mail, even before COVID, so when I ran in 2019, it was right before COVID, the prevalence of vote by mail was growing and growing. And now, as you can imagine, after COVID, when so many people voted by mail for the first time during COVID, I expect it's going to be even more and more prevalent going forward. I looked up some of the numbers to kind of show you exactly what I'm talking about with vote by mail. So this past November in 2021, for the general election, there were 61,300 registered voters in Cherry Hill, okay? And 27,010 of those voters actually casted ballots. So just in general, just so you know, 44% of registered voters voted in this past election, which wasn't a presidential election. Of those people who voted, 14,327 voted by mail. If my math is correct, that's 53%. So over half of the people voted by mail in this past election. That's significant. And just so you know, just to compare, in 2020, when it was COVID, first off, a lot more people voted because it was a presidential election. 74% of the registered voters in Cherry Hill casted ballots for that election, which is really a nice high percentage. But 93% voted by mail in that election. Of course, because it's COVID, that number is inflated. But as you can see in this past election, it was still 53%. So that really changes the focus of the campaign. It's not just getting people to register to vote, but it's also getting people to vote by mail. And then it changes the timing of the campaign because the vote by mail ballots all get mailed out, I'm going to say about a month or so before the election. So our campaign really starts from that moment on. You know, we're out on social media telling people your vote by mail ballots are coming. You should receive them on the mail. They'll drop next Tuesday. And then from then on, it's really all about getting the word out and to get people to return those vote by mail ballots. Because as you probably can guess, Democrats in general are more likely to vote by mail. I mean, you'll remember, you know, all the divisiveness we had with, you know, many people, especially Republicans, not believing in vote by mail and believing that could be a faulty system and preferring to vote in person. So in general, as Democrats, if we can get a large return of the vote by mail ballots, in general, it's going to be more of the Democrats who are voting and hopefully voting for us. So that's, you know, been, I think, a big change in terms of the campaign from now versus then when Art ran in campaigns. in terms of day-to-day governance and town council meetings, comparing then versus now, again, social media plays a big role because Facebook groups can form with special interests, and sometimes those special interests are just against whatever the current administration is doing. And so in terms of governance, we're always watching social media to see, not only those types of things, but also like what people care about, what the concerns are. It's also a good way for us to take the temperature of people that I think we never could do before. But it's also dangerous because if someone decides, for example, we recently had this, that they believe that there was gender inequity in pay in the positions in the mayor's office, for example, they can post that on Facebook and make up numbers and will try to rile people up when factually there's no truth behind that. So you can see it makes what we do a little more difficult. Or, for example, recently there's been concern about taking trees down on Route 70. There have been X's on some of the trees that you'll see. There were people blaming Cherry Hill. Well, we had nothing to do with those X's on the trees. We don't maintain the roads, county road. And the reason, as we came, and we didn't have any notice of that, and the reason we found out the trees were being taken down is because they were interfering with sewer lines and causing a problem, and that the trees will be replaced. But of course, people in the general public at that time didn't know that and were posting all kinds of things. Another example is confusion people have about taxes. Sometimes the municipality, Cherry Hill, will get blamed for tax increases, but the school tax is totally separate from our municipal tax. The municipal tax has not been raised in, I think it might be 10 years now, and we're very proud of that. But sometimes people get confused with increases in the school tax and blame the municipality. So those are the kind of things where, if there's confusion in the community and it's posted on social media, it just gets exacerbated. And we constantly have to be on the lookout for that. The other big difference I'm going to mention from what Art was saying is that he talked about the town council meetings being, I think you used the word tame, Art. While some of our meetings are, a lot of them aren't. And we actually do, not at all meetings, but at some meetings, we do get quite a large group of people attending to air their concerns. And again, I mean, it's great when people have concerns and they come out and they want to discuss them, or if they have questions. But sometimes we get people out because they're just, naysayers, and they're just looking to sort of stir up trouble. But either way, our meetings are often filled with people coming to make comments, which at every town council meeting at the end, there is opportunity for residents to come and make comments. And so it's often quite lively. And some of our meetings are definitely not short, and we're never criticized for having short meetings these days. The other real difference now is that the meetings are broadcast live on Facebook, so that, and I think that's great because people, have the ability to tune in and watch the meetings, even if they can't physically be on site. And that was the case prior to COVID. Now, of course, with COVID, we've taken it one step further. We now have made it so that the public can Zoom in to make comments. So you no longer have to physically be on site in town hall to make comments, but you can Zoom in. And it's wonderful in terms of access. If it's a rainy night, we don't want people driving in the rain. We'd rather have them at home and Zooming in. But the flip side of it is it does make it very easy for people to make comments. So we've had to limit the time that people can talk to 5 minutes person so that everyone gets a chance to speak, because we do have more people zooming in for comment. And we also have people zooming in, sometimes not from Cherry Hill, which sometimes make it confusing to filter out, who really has a vested interest in an issue, and who doesn't. So that's another like major difference in sort of how town council runs these days and what the meetings look like from back then when Art was involved. The other thing I would say is I'm guessing the nature of politics and even governance right now is more divisive than back then. There should be a diversity of opinion. I personally feel like you get the best result when you solve a problem, when you hear from a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives and ideas to solve a problem. But you always need to have mutual respect for each other, and speak and deal with each other with civility. And we don't really have that. I think like we should have that. And it just makes governing more difficult when people are disrespectful and sometimes even nasty and sometimes threatening. So I'm guessing that's something that we have. And again, it's not always, and it's certainly not everyone. It's always the loudest people who are sometimes that way that make the most noise. But I think that is an issue, unfortunately, that we should work on going forward to be able to work with each other with more civility and mutual respect. I think it will be good for everyone. What else? So I'm also guessing that some of the issues that we're dealing with, the current issues that I can tell you about that you might be interested in also, are a little different now than back then. Of course, we still have some of the same issues, of course, like taxes. Everyone cares about taxes and whether we're increasing taxes or reassessing property values, as Art mentioned, or people care a lot about trash collection and maintaining roads and zoning and land use. But we also have a couple different things that I don't think cropped up back then and maybe couldn't have even have been imagined back then. So what we're going to be working on coming up in 2022 is cannabis regulation. Because as you know, cannabis has been decriminalized in the state of New Jersey. So, you can have a neighbor in the backyard across from you using cannabis, and it's perfectly legal. The question for us here as a municipality is the extent we choose to regulate the business of cannabis. And that's what we're going to be exploring and looking at going forward. We now have new regulations from the state in terms of what we can and can't regulate. Other places, such as Voorhees, have allowed for cannabis in certain areas of the township. So it is happening all around us. And one of our tasks going forward will be to figure out to what extent we'll allow in Cherry Hill in terms of the number of permits we permit, where cannabis businesses can set up shop, things of that nature. Something else that you're going to see in 2022, actually on the referendum and the ballot in November, is a question about, we're asking the voters whether you would like Cherry Hill to sort of engage in this new community energy aggregation program, where we go out as a township and negotiate with a clean energy provider to provide energy to Cherry Hill on a renewable basis. There will be certain benchmarks to have to meet these clean energy, renewable energy standards over time, and sort of act as the middleman to negotiate this for Cherry Hill, and then asking each of you, once it's negotiated, if you do nothing, you're automatically in, or you can opt out. So there's been a real, focus on environmental issues that probably wasn't quite as prevalent when Art was on council, and now in particular with clean energy and renewable energy. Something we dealt with last year was with the Airbnbs and the short-term rentals and how that impacted neighborhoods and communities in Cherry Hill. I don't think Airbnb existed back when art was involved. But, then we still have a lot of the same. Like, I'm sure everyone here is, familiar with, a lot of the issues we've had on Route 70 with, for example, whether a new Wawa should come in or not. Neighbors still care about their neighborhoods, and we still have the strike the right balance between business and neighborhoods in our community. So all of that is still the same. So as much as it might be a little different, I guess I would say on the whole, it's still pretty much the same, Art, as when you were involved. And I still remember, Art, when you used to wear that jacket that said mayor on it. I remember back then it was really cool to see a TBS member who was wearing that jacket, and that really inspired me many years ago. So thank you to Art for helping to inspire me to be on council today.
If anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to respond.
Thank you both. I'm sure there are questions, comments, concerns. Great, thanks, Ed.
I'm a 53-and-a-half-year resident of Cherry Hill. So I hark back to John Gilmore and some of your predecessors as mayor. I'm wondering, does Cherry Hill have any input into the tree trimming that goes on in the neighborhoods by the public utilities? It just seems to me that they've come in with their electric or power saws and just indiscriminately destroy half the trees that are on some of the major roads. Old Orchard Road would be my prime example because that's where I live.
Michelle?
Sure. So hi, Ed, how are you?
Good morning.
And thank you for being a resident for so many years in Cherry Hill. So look, PSE&G, they have jurisdiction over, what they need to do to keep their power lines working and safe and for the public. I know the mayor's office does have conversations with PSE&G when we or residents have concerns about the trees and or about the provision of the energy, or when we have power outages. So if there are specific concerns about specific areas, I think it should be brought to the mayor's office because they do have a line of communication open with PSE&G where they do share information and concerns.
Yeah, my experience is that we always had a very good relationship with PSE&G, but no power to direct what they were doing. But we could always try and lobby on behalf of the residents if there's a particular issue.
Yeah, it just seems to me that, the directions they're giving their subcontractors for the tree trimming are just trim the hell out of everything and, don't do more than you need to do because we don't want to pay you again 2 years from now to come back in and do it again.
That's probably right.
Yeah, that does sound about right.
That's their practical solution to the neighborhoods. So I have one more tree question while I'm at it. Crescent Road, Randy, of course he's on with us this morning. And he lives right next to or almost next to the new development that's going in on Crescent Road where they've taken out hundreds of trees, I think. What was the discussion there in that development as to clearing all that land to put, I don't know, a dozen houses in there?
There was definitely an agreement between the developer and the township about the number of trees they were taking down. And it is my understanding that they took down far more trees than they were supposed to. And I would encourage you to complain about it. I drive past there all the time and I think it's a disgrace.
I think
Uh,
everybody thinks it's a disgrace. Randy, do you have any input? Randy lives right next to it, I think, or close to it, and he's documented, I believe, the various tree cutting.
Funny you should ask. I live about 2,000 feet from it. That's I'm in the 1100 block at Crescent versus that's about the 900 block. And Dr. Steve, I can't think of his last name at the moment.
Weinberg.
Right,
Weinberg.
Steve Weinberg. Yeah, thank you. I know has been heading up and trying to talk to the township even more recently. Basically, since they started the project, since I sit on the historical commission here in Cherry Hill, I just have a tendency to take a lot of pictures. So I've been documenting it from the day they brought in the first bulldozers. And matter of fact, just gave them an updated disc so you could kind of see the, I guess you call it the before and after. There has been no heavy equipment there for the last 2 months. It's just, I mean, I don't know if the builders just stopped. I know they agreed to eventually replant trees, but obviously those are going to be baby trees. And right now, if you go by it, which I know most of you have here, it looks like a moonscape out there.
Yeah, I would encourage you all to contact the mayor's office or community development and just say that I passed by that development and I'm very, very disappointed with the number of trees that have been taken down. I served on the planning board for 10 years, and I can tell you that the township is responsive to when the people are upset about something, they will put pressure on the developer to do something about it. Now, there's nothing we can do about the fact that they've cut down so many trees, but we can get them to plant more trees than they planned by putting some pressure on them. And I would encourage you to do that.
And so I think people have reached out because I have heard some of the rumblings of this in the background. It sounds like community development is very much aware of neighbors' concerns about this and has been working with the developer. And apparently, there's been having to federate out the information between community development, which is involved with the planning board, versus engineering that actually goes out on site and inspects the property and the trees, and trying to figure out, if things occurred according to the plan or not. It sounds like, from the little I know, there wasn't very good communication with the neighbors, which I think there's no excuse for that. And community development is working with neighbors currently to try to get to the bottom of what happened. And also, as you said, I do believe there is a commitment to replant trees that were taken down.
You should suggest that they plant mature trees. They have a longer survival, a better survival rate, and look better, and will be in full bloom faster.
I agree.
Rather than little twigs.
And by the way, the one question that gets asked the most of me is, for those that aren't 100% sure what's going on there, is so what big community building or type of industrial building are they putting up there? They don't. A lot of them don't realize it's homes that are supposed to be there eventually.
Right.
That's the impression that it leaves with people.
Right. Lee, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had a totally different aspect to the tree planting. Tree planting at the curbside wasn't always a regulation in Cherry Hill Township. Art, you probably remember when the movement landed in Cherry Hill to force all homeowners and business owners to put trees at the curb.
Right.
So those trees are currently damaging power lines, damaging internet lines. The root systems are damaging sidewalks. They're actually causing brittle breakage to asphalt, which costs here in New Jersey about $1.1 million per 100 yards, the most expensive street relay in the entire nation. So those curbside tree rules have really hurt infrastructure and in efforts to beautify without downstream concerns. And furthermore, they harbor a lot of insects that have been unwelcome, damaging homes and plantings, and causing allergic reactions and stings in the populace. So my real question is, as much as we all love trees, and I'm surrounded by acres of trees where I chose to live in Cherry Hill, the rules and regulations need to be updated to reflect the fact that maybe somebody learned something, to have some forethought instead of having trees planted.
They no longer require curbside in the strip between the sidewalk and the street. They no longer plant trees. Any trees that are planted about 4 feet inside properties.
Well, then why, when the trees are creating problems, isn't it recommended that they be removed? Because currently that's forbidden.
Well, because it would be catastrophically expensive to remove the trees.
How expensive is it?
Not if it's already dropping branches on parked cars. The root system is
I can just tell you, if you start taking out every single tree that's planted along the street, it would cost more money than the township can afford. You'd be redoing sidewalks, you'd be redoing streets. As problems comes up, I'm sure that they're repairing them as they go along. And as you point out, it was in fact a policy that was unfortunate in terms of its short-term thinking. The long-term effects have been very, very bad. But they repair them as they go along, as they can afford them.
But can they be removed if they're causing a problem?
First of all, they don't remove those trees. They cut them down to a stump.
I mean, the other thing I would say about that is, there are so many people out there who care about the environment and who care about trees. And, if you start talking about taking down trees, the opposition would just be tremendous. Because, now the push is really about how do we protect and preserve every single tree in the township. So yes, of course, if a tree is causing a problem like the problems you were listing, Lee, that's one thing, but I don't think we could have any sort of general ordinance or policy to remove trees.
No, I wasn't asking that. You're overreacting. My comment specifically was directed towards the trees causing problems that are damaging.
Those trees too, people are protective of. By the way, I mentioned earlier that I was accused of poisoning a neighborhood full of children. There was a stand of trees behind the library when we were building the library, and there was a neighborhood right behind that. And the neighbors made it very, very clear to me as mayor that if we laid one hand on those trees, that there was going to be hell to pay. So that was my mindset. Well, one day people came into my office and they told me the EPA report has been filed. If you remember, there were apple orchards over there and they used arsenic in apple orchards. So there was traces of arsenic in the ground, very, very small traces of arsenic in the ground. In fact, a child would have to sit on the ground and eat a pound of dirt every day for 100 years to have a problem. But there were traces. So they offered me solutions. They said one thing we could do was we could cut down all the trees. The other thing we could do is we could leave all the trees and remove all the dirt, which would be prohibitively expensive. And the last thing we could do is we could put up a protective fence that said environmentally sensitive area. My mistake was that I didn't call the neighbors and discuss this with them. That's what I should have done. But what I did do, knowing that they didn't want me to touch the tree, is I put up an environmentally sensitive fence. Well, when the neighbors caught wind of that, they got very, very upset. And they accused me of poisoning their children. Well, they didn't really care about poisoning their children. What they really cared about was their property values. And I understood that. But we ended up resolving it. We took down all the trees and they were happy. So you get people on both sides of every issue.
So my question again had nothing to do with trees behind homes.
I understand that. I was just telling a story, Lee. Calm down. When I have a story to tell, I'm going to tell it. Abe,
So you give a politician a microphone.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Talking about trees, we have the township is reviewing a ordinance that we prepare in the environmental board about trees, and it requires replacement of trees. And I think it's going to, the issue really, the problem is 50 years ago, we planted the wrong trees. They, for example, all those maple trees are dying now and stuff like that. So again, this ordinance, which will be considered by the council next year, is going to get some kind of standard of what to do about trees. People, I mean, the problem is those tree companies are basically scaring everybody that the tree is going to fall on your house. And there's amazing amount of trees being cut that don't have to be cut. So I think that's going to be a problem that we'll solve. The other thing is PSE&G. I agree that they chop a lot of stuff, but at the same time, PSE&G is giving us trucks of chips that we have used to line all our trails. So we have a very good relationship with PSE&G, and they basically everything that's cut, we get back. So that's what I want to say. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll look out for the proposal you're talking about, Abe. I mean, I do know trees are just very important. Just in this conversation here, look at how many comments we have about trees, and we do get a lot of people coming to town council with various issues and concerns about preserving the trees. So I do think it makes sense to review whatever policies we have about tree usage and removal and preservation in Cherry Hill. And you said that the environmental board has some sort of proposal coming forth.
It's being reviewed by your council. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I bet community development has it. So I'll be on the lookout for that.
And again, one of the issues that we are really concerned about is the tree companies scaring people into cutting trees and, you know, spending thousands of dollars when it's not necessary. So that's another issue that we have to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. And I know there are some procedures in place where, you know, homeowners are supposed to, before you take trees down, you know, file some sort of paperwork with the township, and a tree specialist will come out and okay it or not. I can tell you that happened to us in our backyard, and we had the township person come out, and he agreed with our arborist that maybe 2 of the trees had to come down, but for one of them, he said no. He thought that still had life in it, and so we didn't take that tree down based on his advice. So Bob was right.
Michelle, the other issue is that we have jurisdiction for the school board, and the school board is cutting a lot of trees too.
Yeah.
So that's another issue that we have dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob Greenberg.
What's the story with the
Yeah,
fire
oh,
department?
excuse me,
The
excuse me.
the fire department
Excuse
is presumptively an agency of government, and yet it has its own elections, and we vote on the salary of the fire commissioner. Why is the fire department an agency of government so different?
Because it's a fire district.
What's that mean?
It's been that way since the township has been formed. There was a commission formed in around 85 or so, not 85, about 1990, about 5 years after I got involved, to see if the township would take over the fire department, and no one wanted that, and so we didn't do it. There was significant opposition to that.
So
But I will say this: the tenor of the fire department has changed completely from a volunteer fire department to a highly professional, highly trained department, one that we can really be proud of. Cherry Hill has a great fire department.
But it's not an agency of government then?
No, they're separately run. Bob Greenberg, you had a question.
Yeah, before we leave the subject of trees, who owns the trees on the park strip?
The township, the property owner is responsible for them. I'm sorry.
They're responsible for them. But
Yeah.
I've noticed
town-
on many of the streets, especially Country Club, where they come in, the utility comes in and, as you've heard, trims the trees, and they kill the trees. They kill the trees.
I know.
And it now becomes the property owner's responsibility to pay thousands of dollars to take a tree out.
The township has I forget the exact legal term. Michelle can help me. Right away on the land, they have a what's it called?
An easement.
Yeah,
an
the township
easement.
has an easement for the land, so they can do that, but it's the property owner's responsibility for the tree.
So what you're saying is that when the utility company comes in and they decimate a tree and the tree dies, it now becomes the property owner's responsibility.
I'm not so sure the utility company wouldn't come back and take down the tree.
They refuse to. I've had this discussion with them. They actually come out and deny that they've done anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, the township should at least have the ability to exercise some control if indeed they have an easement there.
Have you talked to anybody in community development?
Not in years.
Well, give it a shot.
That's what you should do is if you have a specific concern about a specific tree, in particular, I would contact community development.
Well, on my property, excuse me, Lee, on my property, it's a little bit too late because 10 years ago, I took out a 100-foot tree because the utility company came in and cut the heart out of the tree and it died.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that.
Bob, excuse me, that was my point. There was a law that forced homeowners to put trees curbside, and then 20, 30, and 40 years later, those trees are causing problems with the infrastructure, and the township has refused responsibility for their own regulations.
Anybody have a comment about anything other than trees?
Yeah. Wow. This is amazing. All the interest in trees.
Yeah. Can I change the subject?
Yes, you can.
Talking to Michelle about social media. And there are so many different platforms, different apps. And you mentioned, the big ones, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Is that a problem with personnel spending the amount of time necessary to go through all these social media to see what people are talking about and responding? It sounds like something that would cost an awful lot in people's time.
So, yeah, I mean, it is a use of township resources. We do have to have personnel who are checking those sites. But look, they've gotten quite good at it. They know where to look. They know how to look. So I don't think it's as time consuming as you would think. But, if that person didn't have to do that, they could devote their time and resources to something else. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And as more and more people use social media to get their messages out, and there are new platforms that are developed, which I'm sure those, we're not done with just Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. It's going to be more and more of an issue. But again, I think, it's the people who have been charged with that task have gotten quite good at it. And it's not as overwhelming and time consuming as you might think, but that's a good question.
Listen, I hate to eat and run, but I'm taking my two grandsons to the Eagles game. And as much as I love South Jersey Men's Club, I love my grandsons more. So thank you for inviting us. It was really fun. And I haven't had this much fun since I was accused of poisoning the children.
Thanks, Art.
Thank you, Art. It's nice to meet you. Hope to see you in person one day soon.
Thank you.
Good luck. Anything you ever need from the township, you call Michelle.
Yeah, I can give you my my email address, in fact, if that would be helpful, if anyone wants it. It's mgolkow@chtownship.com. So feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. I'm happy to help.
Sure. Would you like to put that in the chat so that it's recorded as part of the?
Sure. Let me
Does
see if I
does
can.
Michelle have time for more questions?
I have to run too because my son's going back up to New York and I need to bring him there.
Okay.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you like the movie Escape into New York instead of From?
Well, excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that people will be reaching out to you probably about trees, but
it's so interesting that there's so much concern about the trees. I mean, it's good to get that feedback.
While Michelle is writing that out,
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
yep,
Great.
got it.
Okay.
Thanks again, Michelle.
All right. Nice to talk
Thank
to
you,
everyone.
Michelle.
thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Don,
Yeah,
you had something?
I'd like to add something that if everybody or a lot of you seem to be concerned about your trees, I'd encourage you. You're welcome to move down to Woolwich in Gloucester County. We're south of you. It's about 1/4 degree warmer, and we have no tree issues.
Don, are you branching out?
Oh,
I think there's a lot of arsenic in the soil down there, though.
No, they use chlordane down there.
The arsenic issue is true. I mean, the fact is that almost everything in Cherry Hill has arsenic because of the apple trees and so on. But
fruit orchards.
I won't worry about it. I mean, it won't kill us. We're too old. So
Abe, the apple seeds themselves have arsenic in them.
yeah.
They're the peach seeds.
Yeah, but I mean, because actually, I've done cleanups on soil, and the levels you see somewhere else. I mean, the biggest problem actually is golf courses. That's the nasty ones, because they had years and years of spraying every stuff you can think of. So I really don't feel like walking in golf courses, but I think Cherry Hill is safe. By the way, Bob, I'm not sure if you kill a tree by trimming it.
Oh, let me clue you in, Abe. The way they cut some of these trees, they just stopped any growth.
Yeah.
It is a real problem. It is a real problem, Abe. It's a real thing.
The problem in Cherry Hill is that a lot of these trees are reaching their natural life, especially maples. I mean, there's almost everybody has red maples. Those don't live more than 50 years. So there's a lot of dead trees there.
Abe, I had an oak, and there are several oaks on Country Club. If you look at them, you can see after they've trimmed them that they're dying off because there's not enough foliage to replenish the energy in the tree.
I agree that there's a lot of oak trees and Country Clubs are dying. Yeah.
By the way, Abe, I'll show you my 70-year-old maple out here.
Still alive?
But the 60-year-old one did die.
Yeah,
So you've got a geriatric
it's up to
maple.
50, yeah. And that's the other issue in the ordinance that we wrote. We specify native trees. A lot of these trees, like the pear trees and all that, I just don't have business being here. So it's another issue. You can select trees that are going to be compatible with the environment. Yeah.
Abe, I should invite you over to inspect my backyard. This where my property is, used to be part of a both apple and not pear, peach orchard.
Yeah,
and
very common.
Right, and the area behind my garage it's taken many years, but I'm now getting sinkholes where some of those trees were. And it took a while to figure it out. So I realized all these holes were perfectly spaced. About 25 feet by 25 feet.
That could be termites too.
That's what?
Actually, termites will eat the roots of the
Well, remember, these trees were taken down in 1949 to make space for the house that was here before mine. So, and it took a number of years. I get some roots, stumps they probably pulled. The other ones that they didn't pull, those are the ones that finally rotted out after 50, 60 years.
I mean, one thing you should remember is all these numbers, all these concentrations that EPA, the risk of EPA does requires 30 years of contact. So, so it's not just one contact. It requires 30 years of contact. So that's why we say for that.
It sounds like we need an arborist club, a new branch of the South Jersey Men's Club, and that will get far more attendance than anything else.
Art can run that.
Yeah, so I propose that those interested set up their own tree club.
But there's a Cherry Hill Garden Club that you can join.
And our moniker can be a chainsaw.
Yeah, we got electric chainsaws now. Really cool for the tree. They're amazingly powerful too. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to remind everybody that the next scheduled meeting would be January 23rd. The hope is to do that live as a breakfast meeting, but as of right now, I do not believe the JCC is allowing breakfast meetings or any food meetings. Everyone needs to be fully masked all the time in all areas of the JCC. So I'm not entirely sure where that's going to go or if that's going to change, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. And I'm not positive that you want to have a meeting without breakfast, which might be the only in-person option.
Phil.
Yes.
I got a call out of nowhere from Rabbi Belinsky. He's the Mashiach, and I don't know why he called me, but he was telling me about the condition of the kitchen there, and it's not kosher. It's totally a mess, and he wanted me to know that. So at this point, not that we were going to use it, but we can't use it. Let's put it that way.
Well, if it's not kosher,
Perfect.
then we can use it.
No. He said it's a new. He doesn't want anything in there. That's the thing, because he has to kosher it and he's got to clean it up and everything. So he's basically telling me we can't use it.
Before he cleans it up, maybe we can use it.
What Robin told me is that the bagel place has been used in the kitchen, and they claim to be kosher. So that's, I don't know. I mean, it was probably the bagel place that messed it up. I don't know.
This is what he told me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to tell you that our speaker for January is Oded Kraus, who's the, I don't know his title, I guess, director of the JCC.
Yeah,
new guy.
He's the director.
He's going to be our speaker. That may have some be a factor in where we end up, what we end up doing for our meeting on the 23rd. Just a note of interest.
We're going to ask him tree questions too.
He could probably give us more cogent answers.
Yeah, he knocked down a lot of trees on the side to make those parking lots too.
Okay. Any other good and welfare? Any other information anybody wants to get out?
I do.
Speak up, Don.
Just to let you know, we're in the playoffs for fantasy football. Today we have Art Korth and Ed Melman, their team playing Ed and Alan Stein. And we have Dick Knopf and his son, grandson, Adam, playing Lloyd Kellner and his sons for the championships. They're the final four teams. And next week, our season will end. And the other thing, the other thing I wanted to mention, does anybody know the status of where the hats are? Ed, do you know who has them, or?
I still have them. I haven't seen Bob or
Okay,
Dave.
okay. That's fine, as long as I know where they are.
I'll hang on to them. I was going to stop at Bob's. Usually we see each other at Pantry, but Pantry's been closed for the last few weeks and will continue to be closed, or at least closed to us. until the 10th of January, when I guess they're going to make another decision as to what is being done in person and what isn't.
That's fine, as long as I know where they are.
Yeah, I've got them. I'll protect them.
Thank you.
You're not
Very
going to
good.
let any trees fall on them now, Ed, will you?
You know, the tree issue, they're well aware of that tree issue. I mean, we've been talking about it for years. I mean, if you go down Old Orchard Road, and there's a lot of other roads like it, it's just their shanda what they did to those trees. And you know, I know we want power in the wintertime when the storms come and so forth, but you know, they just tell their subcontractors just go in there and make sure they don't have to come back for 10 or 20 years, and they just trim the hell out of the center of the trees. They look like what does my wife say, Dr. Seuss trees.
My son lives on Old Orchard or just off it. And I agree with Ed, when we go to visit him, going down there, it's really horrible looking, very distasteful.
And by the way, Ed, just to add insult to injury, would you believe if you're doing new construction, they still charge what's something called, in Cherry Hill specifically, it's called a tree tax. And it's a tax you pay on the frontage of that your property has on the frontage of the street. And it's still on the books after, 60 years. So it's just a one-time tax, but still.
To the developer.
Well, yeah, but like if you're developing your own house or building your own house, or the permit's out in your name, you still pay it.
Yeah. Well, Michelle was correct. I mean, we've been here since '68, and all the builders were required to put trees at the curb. Lee brought this up. And that continued for, I don't know how many years, probably 20, 30, 40 years when they finally got rid of that, because that's what's causing all the problem is all these trees at the curb line.
Yeah, the intelligent builders put the trees right where the sewer junctions are, so that when the trees mature, the roots go into the sewer lines and it screws up your lateral line to your house, but it also screws up the sewer line in the street.
But by the way, not sure if any of you've noticed, but the county roads that run through Cherry Hill, they don't have trees at the curbs. That means Crescent, Berlin Road, Brace Road.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I have a question for any of you who know the answer. Why are they rebuilding the bridge over Crescent there by the school in Penny Plate?
That's simple. Okay, Lee, are you having fun now? Okay, first of all, the bridge was built in 1950 over the turnpike. And so the bridge is 1 year younger than me. Anyway, and it wasn't completely deemed, what's that word they have for it? Where it might fall down on itself, but deficient, I guess is the right word. But nonetheless, they got a grant and $16 million to reconstruct. What's that, about 150 feet across there, 200 feet maybe?
No, about 1.1 million yards per $1 million per 100
like the first one better.
10 feet wide.
Yeah. Right. So what they're doing is increasing the width by approximately, actually a total of 15 feet. But so they can add in the bike lane and all that, that's another thing, all this bike lane crap. And, that was the big thing. If you remember when they rebuilt Springdale Road, the big push was, we want to make those bike lanes. I'm talking about the section between Crescent and Morris. And when's the last time you've seen somebody ride a bike down Springdale? Walk? Yes. I understand that, but ride a bike? Very rare. Anyway.
So the bridge was basically unsafe and they're making it safe, but it seems to be so much wider.
It is. It's about 15 feet wider than the original bridge.
Well, there's another aspect to it too, Randy. The turnpike has decided eventually they're going to widen the turnpike between exit 4 and the Delaware Memorial Bridge to 6 lanes from 4.
Right, right.
So they have to make the bridge bigger, both wider and more space between the supports, so they could add those 2 extra lanes whenever they get around to doing it.
Right.
That's really what generated the project.
Aren't they
Well,
going to have to
that
rebuild
was-
the bridge
As
for
long as
that?
they're doing that, yeah, they should put bike lanes in. And to your point, since I'm a cyclist, I will greatly appreciate the fact that Crescent Road will be safer to bike once the project is done than it is now or prior to the project.
Well, at least the bridge part of it will be safer.
Yeah.
Stay
Well,
on
they've
the bridge.
they've improved the part west of the bridge all the way up to Brace Road. Now,
Yeah.
the part that goes from the turnpike past going towards Springdale past your house, that still sucks. And hopefully they'll get to that eventually.
Yep. Yep. At any rate, 16, just so you know, 16 million of your tax dollars for that specific bridge.
Well, but the toll dollars should be paying for it. It's the turnpike.
Not 100%, but you're close, but not 100%.
I used to walk that bridge and it was very dangerous. Hopefully now it's going to be
it's going to be a lot better.
Well, they'll have protected pedestrian on both sides, so that's fine
for cyclists, right?
Yeah.
While we're talking Cherry Hill, can we do one more? What's the latest on the Wawa at Barclay?
That's the question I was going to ask them, what they're going to do about that.
It's supposed to come up before township planning board meeting, as far as I know, or zoning or planning. I'm not sure.
Planning meeting. Yeah.
So that, but I don't know that.
Somebody had said it was proposed now that they move the building itself to like the middle of the parking lot.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the question really is it in accordance with the master plan from Cherry Hill that was adopted about 15 years ago? And it's not. So they've been violating their own master plan. So that's the way they should be approaching it. And that's what I suggested to the leadership on the people that guessed it.
Should have brought it up, Nelson.
I tried to, but everybody kept
we would have brought it up, but we lost our audience.
Yeah. Well, you could have branched out, but you didn't.
Oh, stop that, Brandy.
It's also the worst traffic light in township in Cherry Hill section. It's terrible that.
Where again, Abe? I'm sorry.
All the time.
Huh?
Backs up 70 all the time.
Yep, it sure does.
Out of curiosity, anybody know why there's no connector road between the Wegmans shopping center and the ShopRite shopping center?
Yes, I'll tell you about that one.
Go ahead.
That's all right. If I'm wrong, Nelson, you'll correct me.
Yeah.
It has to do with New Jersey Transit. Okay. It would require an at-grade crossing, which is actually almost back behind the Costco area there. And an at-grade crossing would require, well, first of all, they try not to have at-grade crossings. Okay. That's very dangerous because you know what idiots do. Okay. And if they were to build an over or underpass, you're talking millions of dollars. Okay. So in current, what it costs to do. So it's the easiest, simple way would be to do it. But then the study has shown that will it be worth the cost of, say, doing an underpass? Even the grade crossing is it's close to about $500,000 to put up this, all the stuff that's required for it. It's like 350,000 or $500,000, whatever it was pretty high. And to do a little overpass, underpass type thing runs into several millions of dollars. Okay. So it's like, and somebody has to then maintain it. New Jersey Transit owns the right of way there. So then they become responsible. They really don't want the responsibility. Back and forth and back and forth. That's the
Randy, I thought that the settlement between ShopRite and Costco required to have that connection.
No, it wasn't a requirement, Abe. It was not a requirement.
Yeah, no, that was part of the settlement.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
That's why ShopRite settled the case.
Yeah, I know that, but it wasn't the requirement that you think it was. It all hinged on New Jersey Transit. Ultimately, that's the ultimate hinge.
Abe, that's what I read. Randy, you are correct. The other side is that Steve Ravitz never spoke to Mayor Khan after that fell through because he was so aggravated about it. Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
ShopRite lost too because they sued Wegmans and they sued Costco, and they
Different issue, but it was over a gasoline station.
Right.
They get pumping gas.
Yep. Costco had put in for a variance because of the specific zoning type thing, and that's where ShopRite and the rest of them got their bloomers twisted. So ultimately it was resolved, and that's what held up the building of that Costco almost. I think it was either 4 years, something.
Yeah.
So let me tell you an environmental issue. By letting Wawa and Costco build gas stations, it's good for the environment because you're eliminating out of business those little gas stations that leak all the time. So, I mean, Wawa has the latest technology on leakage detection and all that. And I'm sure Costco has the same thing.
Right.
So, protesting a construction of Wawa just because of that is not good. I mean, and we had terrible problems in Delaware. Well, Wawa succeeded in driving everybody else out of business. There's basically no leaks now in Delaware. So
they're also not the low price leader anymore either.
Yeah. Well, now that
I disagree with you about the leaks because I understand when President Biden shows up, he has to wear his diapers or there's going to be a leak. That's terrible.
Reminds you, where's Perlo? Perlo is not there.
Oh yeah.
Watch out when you start talking about old people.
Yeah, I know. I'm one too.
That's all right, Nelson.
Okay.
You can still get your diapers at Costco.
Great. So
Well,
we've got.
let me tell you a stupid story. My car, which is already 12 years old, and I refuse to get rid of it, had a clogged valve somewhere that basically refused to get gas into the tank. So I go to Costco, and the guy is pumping the gas, and all of a sudden I see 3 girls in vest running with a tank, and I said, "What's going on?" And the guy said, "Well, you spilled the gas, and this is our spill team. I should have a team to deal with my problem." That was funny. I mean, it cost me $300 to fix. So that wasn't funny, but spill team.
Abe,
Yeah.
Abe, we're all going to chip in and get you a new car.
Yeah, I know. I really do. I mean, it's just falling apart. Yeah.
Okay. Any other men's club issues? The trees and the gas and the diapers are all wonderful.
Okay.
But anything else that's going on?
We're going to have an investment
share
meeting.
What was that?
We actually can have an investment club meeting. I sent out the information in the last hour.
Perfect.
No trees involved.
Very good. Okay, gentlemen.
Why would you say that?
We got to invest in PSE&G.
Listen. Phil says we have to leave.
You don't have to leave. You can stay on.
Act like a tree and leave.
Yeah, you can stay on. I can stop the recording and you can kibitz for another hour or two.
Oh, you mean we're still being recorded? Oh my God.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the National
Stopping.
Arbor Society is going to have a copy.